Somewhere in Siberia, a scientist chips a tusk out of the permafrost. It's 20,000 years old. The animal it belonged to weighed 6 tons and stood 4 meters tall at the shoulder. Lying next to the tusk when it came out of the ground is a stone spear point. Someone hunted this animal. He doesn't think much of it. This happens all the time. The Siberian permafrost has been giving up mammoths for over 3 centuries. Tusks, skulls, whole frozen carcasses with the stomach contents still preserved. One of them had buttercups in its mouth, still identifiable, from a meadow that stopped existing before anyone built a pyramid. Cave lion cubs curled up as if sleeping, wolves with their fur intact, and scattered among all of it, stone tools, cut-marked bones, campfire ash. If you ask a zoologist what the permafrost is, you get one answer. If you ask an archaeologist, you get a different one. It's a graveyard sitting on top of a country. You weren't taught about this country in school because it has no borders, no name in any surviving language, and no modern equivalent. It doesn't appear on any map. It stopped existing about 12,000 years ago and nothing has replaced it. We call it the Mammoth Steppe. That is not what the people who lived there called it. We don't know what they called it. Let's go back. 20,000 years ago, at the coldest point of the last ice age, there was a single continuous grassland stretching from Spain to the Yukon. It crossed what is now France, Germany, Poland, Ukraine, all of Russia, Siberia, the Bering Land Bridge, Alaska, and part of Canada. It was by a wide margin the largest ecosystem on Earth. It was not tundra. This is the part people get wrong. Tundra is wet, boggy, and nearly dead. It supports almost nothing. The Mammoth Steppe was dry, cold, and extremely productive. Deep-rooted grasses, herbs, wildflowers in summer. It was a grassland the size of a continent in a climate that should have been a desert, and it was absolutely full of animals. Woolly mammoths, woolly rhinoceros, steppe bison the size of a small car, wild horses in herds of thousands, giant deer with antlers 3.5 meters across, cave lions bigger than African lions, and there were a lot of them, cave hyenas, wolves, Arctic foxes, saiga antelope. Some estimates put the animal density of the Mammoth Steppe at roughly the same level as the Serengeti today, except it was about 50 times larger and it was frozen. And there were people, not many, but they were everywhere. Humans had been living on the Mammoth Steppe for at least 40,000 years by that point. They followed the herds, they lived in small groups, and they were, by every measure we have, extraordinarily good at this. Here's how good. In 1955, workers digging a clay pit outside the Russian city of Vladimir found a burial. The site is called Sungir. It is roughly 34,000 years old. Inside were 2 children buried head to head. A boy around 12, a girl around 10. They were covered in ivory beads, around 10,000 of them carved from mammoth tusk sewn into their clothing. Experimental archaeologists have tried to reproduce these beads using period tools. Each one takes somewhere between 45 minutes and an hour to make. 10,000 beads. That is several thousand hours of work put in the ground. Alongside them were ivory spears, one of them over 2 meters long, made from a single mammoth tusk that had been straightened. We still do not fully know how they straighten mammoth ivory. It remains an open question in Paleolithic archaeology. These were not people barely surviving. These were people with enough surplus, enough time, and enough social structure to spend thousands of hours on a funeral. They also built houses out of mammoths. At a site in Ukraine called Mazhirik, archaeologists found 4 dwellings made from mammoth bone. Each one used around 150 bones, skulls stacked into foundation walls, jawbones interlocked into herringbone patterns, tusks arched over the entrance, covered in hides, hearths inside. Some had been standing long enough to be repaired. These are among the oldest known permanent structures built by humans anywhere on Earth, and they are made out of the animal these people ate. For roughly 40,000 years, this worked, and then about 14,000 years ago, it started to warm. The warming itself was not the problem. The problem was what warming does to a dry grassland. Warmer air holds more moisture. More moisture means more snow, more rain, more waterlogged ground. The frozen layer beneath the grass began to thaw and turn to bog. The deep-rooted grasses that held the entire system together could not survive in wet soil. Mosses replaced them. Shrubs moved in. Trees followed. The Mammoth Steppe did not shrink. It was replaced from the inside by an ecosystem that could not feed anything larger than a reindeer. The mammoths went first, then almost everything else. Woolly rhinoceros, gone. Steppe bison, gone. Giant deer, gone. Cave lion, gone. Cave hyena, gone. In the space of a few thousand years, Earth lost most of its largest land animals. There is still an argument about how much of this was climate and how much of it was us. Humans were hunting these animals the entire time, and in some regions, the extinctions line up suspiciously well with human expansion. The honest answer is that it was probably both, and the exact ratio is still being fought over in journals. What is not argued about is what happened to the people. They didn't die, they adapted, or they moved, or they became something else. The Mammoth Steppe cultures dissolved into the cultures that came after them. The reindeer herders of Siberia, the first Americans who had already crossed into Alaska, the Mesolithic hunters of Europe. Their descendants are alive right now, but the world they were built for is gone. Completely. There is no ecosystem on Earth today that resembles the Mammoth Steppe. It is the only major biome to have disappeared entirely in the time humans have existed, except it's still down there. The permafrost that replaced the grassland preserved everything that died on it. Frozen mammoths keep coming out of the ground in Siberia and Alaska. Some are intact enough that researchers have recovered liquid blood, intestinal contents, and cell nuclei. Ivory hunters now dig commercially for mammoth tusk. It's legal. It's a real industry. And the permafrost is thawing. That frozen ground holds roughly twice as much carbon as the entire atmosphere. As it melts, it releases some of that, which warms things further, which melts more. The last mammoths did not die on the mainland. A small population survived on Wrangel Island off the coast of Siberia in isolation. They were still alive when the pyramids at Giza were being built. They died out around 4,000 years ago, roughly the same century people in Egypt were writing things down. Nobody wrote anything down about the mammoths. There was nobody left on the island to notice. That's what's at the edge of the ice.